Today's lesson is Chapter 9, Lesson 12, which can be found on pages 683 through 688. Our objective is I can subtract mixed numbers. Question 1. The least common denominator is also known as the least common blank. Question 2. If the second fraction is bigger than the first fraction, you need to blank from the whole number.
With mixed numbers, I think it's helpful to line the problem up vertically. So let's rewrite this first problem as 9 1/3 minus 5 2/15. The next step, just like any other fraction problem, will be to determine the least common denominator when we have a denominator of 3 and 15. And the least common denominator is the least common multiple of 3 and 15, or the smallest number that is divisible by both 15 and 3, which would be 15. So to rewrite 1/3 with the denominator of 15, we'll multiply the denominator by 5 as well as the numerator, which is like multiplying by 5 over 5. Now let's go ahead and rewrite this. We're going to have 9, and this will be 5/15, and we'll leave 5 2/15 the same. Now we do have to remember this is a subtraction problem, so now we'll subtract the fractions and then subtract the whole numbers. So the denominator stays the same. The numerator will be 5 minus 2, that's 3, and then we have 9 minus 5, which is equal to 4. So 4 3/15 is our difference, but this fraction can simplify. There's 1 3 in 3, and there's 5 3s in 15, so this simplifies to 4 1/5. Now let's take a look at our second example. That's going to be a little bit more involved because we're going to have to borrow. We'll first set this up vertically, so we have 12 5/6 minus 3 7/8. Next, we'll determine the least common denominator, which will be the least common multiple of 6 and 8. Well, we could multiply 6 and 8 and use 48 as our common denominator, but 24 would be the least common denominator. So we have to multiply 6 by 4 to get 24. So we'll do the same in the numerator. We have to multiply 8 by 3 to get 24, so we'll do the same in the numerator. So now we're going to have 12 20/24. And here we'll have 3 21/24. Now here we have a little bit of a problem when we try to subtract our fractions. We can't subtract 21/24 from 20/24 because this fraction isn't large enough. We actually have to borrow 1 from this 12. So let's take a look at how we're going to do that. We know we can rewrite 12 20/24 as 12 plus 20/24. And if we borrow 1 from the 12, we can write 12 as 11 plus 1 plus 20/24. But we can rewrite 1 as 24/24. 11 plus 24/24 plus 20/24. This is the key to understanding how to borrow. If we borrowed this 1 from the 12 and rewrite 1 as 24/24, we can now add these two fractions here. So 12 20/24 is equal to 11 44/24. And now we can perform this subtraction. Denominator stays the same. 44 minus 21 is equal to 23, and 11 minus 3 is equal to 8. So if you find this borrowing idea a little bit challenging, it's worth spending a little extra time understanding exactly what's happening as described here. In another video, I do show how you can avoid borrowing by converting these mixed numbers to improper fractions.
Alright, here's the example in your book on page 683. So it says one king crab weighs 2 3/4 pounds, and the second king crab weighs 1 1/4 pounds. How much more does the one king crab weigh? So we have to subtract. So our subtraction problem is 2 3/4 minus 1 1/4. They already have common denominators, so we don't need to change that. Then we can first estimate and say, well, 3/4 is pretty close to 1 whole, so this is about 3. and 1/4 is pretty close to 0, so it's about 1. So we have 3 minus 1. Our answer should be about 2. So one way is to look at it with models. So this is 2 3/4 in a model. And then you can subtract out 1 whole by crossing it out, and then a 1/4 tile. So when we do it that way, we have 1 whole and 2/4 left, which, if we simplify, is the same as 1 1/2. Alright, here's another example without models. So in this case, we have 6 11/16 minus 2 5/8. So we can estimate and say that 11/16 is pretty close to a whole, so it's about 7. And 5/8 is also pretty close to a whole, so we'll say it's about 3. So 7 minus 3, our estimate is about 4. So now we have to find an equivalent fraction because they don't have a common denominator. So I can look at this and already know that 8 goes into 16. So that's their least common multiple. So I can multiply 5 and 8, the numerator and denominator, both by 2, and then I'll still have the same whole number, 2, and my numerator and denominator will then change to 10/16. So now I have 2 and 10/16. So I do have common denominator now, so I can just subtract. So first I will subtract the whole number, so 6 minus 2, and that will give me 4. And then we can subtract the fraction we just made, which is 6 11/16 minus 2 10/16. Now that we have a common denominator, we can do 11 minus 10, which will just give us 1, and then our denominator will stay the same, which is 16. So our answer is 4 1/16. And 1/16 is already simplified, so we just leave it like that. Alright, here are the questions again, and answer those in the form. If you're confused on number 2, I would go back and watch that YouTube video I showed, and it was the second example.